Going online to order food or drink products has become very common. But what if I told you that you're settling for the rest, not brewing with the best? Well, you'd listen to me, I'm sure, because I'm a moderately trusted source, and you're already here listening to me anyway. But hey, we always kick off a podcast with a promo from our sponsor, and I'm going to awkwardly segue to telling you that they are Sparkplug Coffee. They deal in premium quality beans, which will help you make the best coffee you've ever brewed. It's convenient and affordable, and it's so much cheaper and more delicious than some restaurant blend or takeout. If you live in the US or Canada, then your orders will be delivered right to your door. And my fellow Canadianos, you will get your packages shipped for free. But hey, if you become part of the Autopilot Coffee Club, it just gets better. You can cancel or even just pause any old time. But you'll have a hard time finding your new favorite if you do cancel. The website is sparkplug.coffee/HYES. That HYES bit at the end there snags you a one-time 20% discount. Hop to it, you fellow tramps. Wait, that sounded bad. I was referring to Charlie Chaplin's longtime character. I wasn't referring to your lifestyle. Or my own. Anyway, I talked about a silent classic last week, and I'm going to do it again right now. Chaplin is waiting on me, so action. Have you ever seen The Kid? Hi, motion picture monkeys, and thank you from the bottom of my heart and the pit of my guts for downloading or streaming the 640th show on this here classic movies extravaganza called Have You Ever Seen? What we do is look back at films from the days of yore and mine and spoil the crap out of them. Bev Ellis isn't on the pod today because she doesn't do this on Fridays, so this is just Bev's husband, Ryan Ellis. I, of course, posted an episode about Keaton's Steamboat Bill Jr. just 7 days ago, but this ep is going up now rather than on the 24th because we will be away on vacation that day. Also, don't think this wasn't a deliberate tactic to talk about the two most famous silent film actors of all time, Keaton and Chaplin, in 2 consecutive weeks. Although Steamboat Bill Jr. being available on Canopy and The Kid being on TCM, and both of them also being on YouTube, helped convince me of that too. So let's talk about Charles Chaplin's The Kid. I just realized you might have thought this was the Bruce Willis movie, but of course it is not. After some premieres in January, this tomfoolery was released by First National Pictures on February 6th, 1921, and it sounds like it was a hit. This 104-year-old is the third oldest movie on this channel. Griffith's Birth of a Nation and Intolerance are the only two you'll find in Have You Ever Seen's archive that came out before this one did. We could talk about the plot at this stage of the review, as I've been doing a lot lately, but there aren't that many actors to sort out, plus the story will explain itself as I go along. So let's see what those who write about movies for a living think of it. And they think it's the bee's knees. The film was well reviewed when it came out a century ago, and it's got great numbers on Rotten Tomatoes in the here and now. Not just great, in fact, but perfect. Every single Tomatoes critic likes it, 100%. And there's quite a sample size for something that came out so long ago. There are 49 reviews, and the average is 8.7 out of 10. That, of course, could change. I'm recording this in late December. This goes up, 3 weeks later? But still, at this point, 49 reviews. They all liked it. The popcorn meter isn't also perfect, but the number is a very strong 95%. Chucky C's other perfect score is The Gold Rush, which makes sense because, to me, it's his greatest film. There's also something called The Idol Class, which I don't remember ever hearing about until an hour ago. Well, okay, excluding that one, The Gold Rush and The Kid are the two perfect ones. But Modern Times, City Lights, and The Great Dictator are way up there too. Dictator has the worst numbers of all of those, and even that is at 92%. Those 4 have all been reviewed on this channel, although we did his big 3, The Gold Rush, City Lights, and Modern Times, a very long time ago. They were among our first reviews in 2013, in fact. Even The Great Dictator was something we talked about quite a while back, in November 2020. The Kitty Kid is 136th on the IMDb 250. That's bound to change in the next month or so. And how about this? The film that won Anthony Hopkins' second Oscar, The Father, is 1 spot behind this. The Father, The Kid. As for the rest of the Chaps classics, Modern Times is 49th on the IMDb 250, City Lights is 55th, The Great Dictator is 68th, and The Gold Rush is 196th. I can't believe the fanboys rank his best and funniest flick the lowest. What's wrong with you guys? Box Office Mojo never tells us about grosses from that long ago, but the numbers, that website The Numbers, says this movie was second at the box office that year, although they only show this and The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Nothing else is listed, just those two. Congress inducted this picture into the National Film Registry in 2011, along with 4 others that we have covered in the past: Bambi, Forrest Gump, The Lost Weekend, and The Silence of the Lambs. Those last 3 all won the Best Picture Oscar, and then there's Bambi. If you listen to this show regularly, you'll know I'm not a fan. As for the Academy Awards, The Kid came out many years before the Oscars even existed, so obviously this wasn't nominated for any. Chaplin was only ever nominated for 4 competitive Oscars, for writing The Great Dictator and for writing Monsieur Verdoux. I don't know if I said that right, Monsieur Verdoux. Plus for his leading performances in The Great Dictator, and his only competitive win was for his music for Limelight, which was first released in 1952, yet didn't win that Oscar for another 20 years. I guess the reason for that was that the movie wasn't actually released in California until 1972, so I guess in a way it wasn't eligible for 20 years. Very odd how that works sometimes. And Chappie shared the honor with Ray Rash and Larry Russell, although they were both dead by then, so they couldn't bask in belated glory like he could. Charlie was also given 2 honorary awards in his career, one in 1929 for acting, writing, directing, and producing The Circus, and then he was given a Life Achievement Trophy in 1972, which got him a long standing ovation from the enthusiastic crowd at the Oscars. A big reason why the audience reacted like that is because he had taken off and gone back to England in the early 50s, rather than get caught up on the Red Scare in Hollywood. I'm not sure he was a communist, but I think he had leanings towards it or sympathies or what have you. I'm getting out of here, is what he said. I don't think he had been back in Los Angeles at all until that point in 72 at the Oscars. He didn't say much in his acceptance speech in 72, I think because he was overwhelmed after getting an apparently 12-minute standing ovation. The American Film Institute nominated The Kid for 4 lists: the Top 100 Laughs, the Top 100 Cheers, and both the 1998 and 2007 Top 100 lists, so the main list, the greatest of all time movies list. And while this film didn't make any of those, Chaplin was all over the AFI's lists with his other famous flicks. Those big 3 just blanket them, especially City Lights. All right, those are the film's impressive credentials. Let's see what this picture with a smile and perhaps a tear is all about. That's on the opening card. Oh, I'll let you know now, by the way, that I'll mostly call the actors by their real names, rather than always calling them by how they're billed, which is a man for Carl Miller, a woman for Edna Purviance, and a tramp for Charlie Chaplin. And it's noteworthy, too, in the opening credits, Chaplin bills himself after Carl Miller, Edna Purviance, I think it's Purviance, not Purviance anyway, and Jack Coogan, not Jackie, but Jack. The film starts at the charity hospital, where Edna's leaving with a newborn. Of course, this is the baby who will become Jackie Coogan. We iris in and then back out to see Carl Miller, who's the father of this bastard child. I'm using that word correctly. That's not offensive. Chaplin loved using that iris. I think he did quite a lot of it in this movie and certainly in other films too. This irresponsible artist, Carl Miller, is working in his studio and taking a break from being creative to admire a picture of Edna, which he accidentally drops in the fireplace. He gets over that blunder quickly, though, as he cavalierly lights a cigarette with it while it goes right up in flames. Back to sad little Edna, who spots a rich and newly married couple coming out of a church. They don't know her at all, but she decides to make their wedding present from her this kid she just had. So she nestles him in the back seat of their nice expensive car. But then the vehicle is stolen by 2 crumb-bum thieves. The couple not only just lost Edna's human gift that they didn't even ask for or know was there, but they lost the ride too. What's worse? Maybe the ride. This kid, incidentally, looks like he's many months old already, and that's typical for babies in movies. They don't actually use newborns. Maybe sometimes, but not usually use them in movie scenes, TV scenes. A baby tends to be 3 to 6 months old before making his or her big screen debut. This is a big kid, though, for having just been born. This baby only makes its presence known by crying once the criminals have gotten a certain distance away. Why check the back seat at all? And since they're in no position to be 2 men and a baby, who would get that sweet Selleck roll? The sweet Selleck roll. He's the best thing in that movie, or those 2 movies. They just leave the tyke in an alley, still wrapped up in its blanket, only to be discovered by the tramp, who's strolling by and getting all manner of trash thrown on him from the windows above. I don't think they're aiming for him. He's just in the wrong place at the worst possible time. At first, the little fellow thinks maybe one of those trash throwers bombed the baby into the street, too. Then he decides it simply must belong to a woman who wanders by with a carriage. But there's a payoff to that in a minute. So rather than be saddled with this responsibility he never asked for, he goes to put the kid back where he found him, until a cop happens along and glowers at him. You gotta glower in silent movies. It's in the Constitution. So our man instead pawns the child off on an old man, but that's not gonna work either. After he plops baby boy into a woman's carriage, that same woman as before, which now has her own kid in it, she attacks him and makes him get that second kid out of there. The cop happening along again convinces the tramp he better do just that. After giving some thought to putting the bundle of Joy into a sewer grate, he actually decides to search amongst the swaddling clothes and finds a note from the mother, asking whoever finds him to take care of this orphan child, which puts a huge smile on Charlie's face. I guess this man who can barely scrounge up enough food for himself was just dying to have another mouth to feed, and he did his due diligence in trying to return the baby to the proper people, so mine. Back to Edna, who has a youngster amble up and pull on her sleeve for some reason, but she already gave her baby away, and the kid's mother makes clear that she can't have this one. Although you can tell Edna regrets her decision to give hers away here. She even runs up to the door of a big expensive house to beg for her kid back, but I say, no baby here. Meanwhile, outside Charlie's crappy little apartment, he tells a woman he knows that the baby's name is John. He just made that up on the spot. He creates a hammock for the young man to sleep in and uses a flowering can instead of a proper baby bottle. He's even cutting up clothes for diapers, and he seems to be in total bliss about the whole thing. Charlie Chaplin was different from Buster Keaton in a lot of ways, but one big one was that the man who played the tramp smiled a lot in his films. 5 years pass, and here's little Jackie Coogan, wearing rags and sitting on a curb. The man he calls Papa still lives in the same place, so maybe he's not exactly a tramp. He has an address and he must be paying rent, and it's been half a decade of this. Although I guess Chaplin wasn't necessarily playing the tramp as homeless in his movies, was he? He certainly wasn't here. Anyway, Charlie cleans the young man up a bit with a cloth and some spit. Sure, it's cute, but I guess this also suggests they can't afford soap or water. They team up to make some money, with the scam being that the kid breaks people's windows with rocks and then runs away. Then Charlie just happens to walk past with panes of glass strapped to his back. I can fix the problem that I helped create, ma'am. But after this works a few times, a cop stops the kid before he can break another window. And since this member of the fuzz is now onto the scheme, Charlie has to kick his son away when he catches up to him and tries to walk beside him. Get away, punk, I don't know you. They seem to have gotten back to hustling people, though, because soon after Chaz is fixing another window and flirting with the woman who lives there, who isn't into it at first, by the way, but she is by the time the same cop comes home from work. There's a clever bit of staging here when the policeman's hand ends up on the tramp's shoulder and then around his neck. Charlie doesn't mind at first because he thinks this is the woman's hand getting a little familiar with him. You'd think that he'd know the difference between a man's hand and a woman's hand. Since the man with the badge had already been trying to bust them for what is a scam, the window thing and all, he's doubly mad that this guy was getting fresh with his old lady. The chapster is able to run away and give him the slip, though, allowing him and Jack to dig into a lot of stew once they get home. Charlie dumps more food on this boy's plate than even our friend Chris can eat, and that's really saying something. Yeah, they're breaking the law and doing something pretty scummy to make money, but at least they have a place to sleep, and they're not starving to death. While these guys have been living like this for half a decade, John's mother lowered herself to become an actress. Ugh. And she got very rich doing it. She's got a big house and servants now, plus a giant arrangement of flowers is sent over during this scene. Now, the delivery boy is black, but is this a white kid in blackface? I wasn't entirely sure about that, but I think so. I'm not going to shriek my head off about it because this movie was made over 100 years ago, but what an odd choice. Just give a black kid an acting job if you want one to play this character. Edna has her head screwed on right, though, because she's nice to this kid and she's generous with the neighborhood kids, too, giving them handouts and also cuddling with a friend's baby, until out the tramp's door walks her actual son. She'd been sitting on their stoop, never realizing that right inside was the baby she gave away. The one that got away. Coogan and Purviance lock eyes and smile at each other, although this genuinely touching moment is ruined a bit when he starts to pick his nose. She gives the baby back to her friend and walks off. Jackie Boy waves at her, although she can't see him do that. I like that. That was pretty touching. Meanwhile, John's blood father, the Carl Miller character, has become a successful painter. Edna shows up at a gathering where that guy happens to be, and for the second time in minutes, she locks eyes with a significant person from her past. No smiling here, though. In fact, seeing him makes her sad enough that she walks out to the balcony to look forlornly out into the middle distance. But Carl doesn't pretend he doesn't know her. He's well aware of who she is. He even goes out and chats her up, seeming to be contrite about how he left her to birth that kid on her own. Although I guess he doesn't know until right now that she gave little Jackie away when she felt she had no other choice. They're both sad and ashamed that any of this happened, although she'd no doubt feel worse if she knew that the car thieves left their little one in an alley until the tramp came along and saved the day. Of course, she doesn't even know about the car thieves, does she? We're never going to see Carl Miller again, by the way. When the scene ends, that's it for him. I'm not sure why he was in this at all. We know she had sex with somebody and had a baby out of it. But their son lives, and he's happy as several larks with his adopted dad, preparing a huge stack of pancakes while Charlie catches up on his reading. There's a good gag here where Charlie spots a hole in the middle of the blanket, then arranges it so that the whole thing drapes over him like a floor-length poncho. Gotta stay warm somehow, baby. I guess Charlie himself had this somebody else makes pancakes while I read in bed routine when he was a boy. I think it was his mother. So this is one of the many scenes he put in his films that came from real life. They split the pancakes, with Charlie cutting one in half to make sure they have the exact same amount. So your meal consists of batter, syrup, and butter, and that's it, huh? Okay, a little coffee's on the side, too. Still no roughage or fruit of any kind? It's a good way to get some scurvy. Once he's gotten his fill, Jackie goes out to the stoop to play with a toy. It's a toy. But a bully kid steals it and then gets into a brutal fistfight with our young man over it. Charlie comes out to break it up, only another guy interferes with Chaplin's interference. And when the boys get back into it, Charlie Beaufarley lets the kids take a few more swings. They even treat it like a real boxing match, with Chaplin setting Coogan on a windowsill between rounds, like it's the corner of the ring, and acting like he's Mick to Jackie's Rocky. Slip the jab! Slip the jab! Wonder if Chucky should get himself a hearing aid so he can hear stupid things better. But the one who started all this has a big brother who comes along and sees his little brother crying from the beating John laid on him. He wants them to keep at it, and if Charlie Jr. wins, then he promises that he's going to wail on Chaplin. So when John goes down for even just a second, Charlie pins him to the ground with his foot and lifts the bully kid's arm into the air like he won the big one out in the ballpark. You gotta stay down, kid. But the bully's brother decides he wants a piece of the tramp anyway, and they get into a throwdown that's pretty humorous. Which is stopped by Edna? I guess this is her? She makes them shake hands and pretend like they're all patched up. But when she gets all Bible on us and quotes Jesus saying, if he smites you on one cheek, offer him the other, the big guy offers it up, and old Chuck just hits him in the face. You asked for it, dude. Literally. So they're back at it, with Chaplin ducking every haymaker thrown by the punch-drunk doofus. There's also some other guy laying in the street at this point, suggesting Chaplin cut out an entire bit where that guy was accidentally waylaid. Part of the reason why he won this fight, by the way, why Chaplin did, is because he was regularly bopping the big buffoon's booper with a brick. He'd duck a swing, then take a shot with the brick. And this is our hero. Meanwhile, the kid gets sick, probably from a lack of proper nourishment, and a rich doctor makes a house call. They're eating, but not very healthily. The doc asks if the tramp is the father, which gets practically, from the double C. He held on to the note from the woman, the one about keeping and caring for this orphan child, and shows it to the doc, who announces that the young'un needs proper attention and a better house to live in than this place. John recovers after a few days and seems to be back to his old tricks when a truck with County Orphan Asylum labeled on it pulls up. So I guess the doctor's a snitch. The attendant who drove the truck gets the kid halfway out the door until Charlie starts another fight, with the kid hitting the two intruders with a big ball-peen hammer. The cop hears all this and joins the ruckus. That's enough to tie up the tramp so the attendant can get John out of there. And here's the most famous moment in the entire movie, one of the most famous in all of silent cinema probably, when Jackie Coogan is put into the back of the truck and pleads for his father. It's pretty heartbreaking as it is, but if you could hear him yelling for the man that he thinks is his dad, you'd probably be a puddle on the floor. Or I would. It's quite a moment. Although I don't know why he doesn't just jump out of the back of the truck and take off. But no matter. We need the drama, and we need this classic scene. Charlie gets away from the authorities and ends up running along the rooftops, trying to track where the truck with his tyke is trekking. He does cut it off and jumps in the back, dumping out the doctor and reuniting with his boy. They even kiss on the lips. I know Charlie liked him young, but I thought they had to at least be older than this, and they had to be a girl. Our man chases the attendant away, and the boys stroll off together. That attendant really was scared off easy by this little guy. The doctor shows up after all this and shows the note to the mother. She recognizes her own handwriting and has a look of, horror more than joy when she realizes that the little boy she's seen around town is hers. Charlie and John have to hide out from the cops for a while, so they go to a flop house and pony up for a bed. When the man in charge of the house isn't looking, Chaplin opens the window, lets the kid in, and throws a blanket over him. Hide him, or I guess he'd have to pay for him too? Or maybe it's just worry that word got out about who these two are. There's some hijinks with the kid keeping himself hidden from the house manager, and they pull off some pretty good sight gags using the blanket and such, until he's found and Daddy has to pay for two after all. But the cops have taken out an ad in the paper that the manager happens to be reading, which offers $1,000 for the return of the lost child, who was last seen with a little man, I'm quoting here, little man with large flat feet and small mustache. Small mustache. Bring him back and no questions asked. $1,000 was a lot of money in 1921. It's not nothing even now. So while Charlie pulls the blanket off the kid in that classic I turn on my side and yank the covers entirely off of you way, and there's a charming bit with the kid kicking him, who in turn kicks the man beside him. The manager has seen that ad through all this, and he swoops in when adopted Papa is asleep and swipes John right out of the bed. The tramp is frantic when he wakes up and there's no kid there beside him, waking up all the other guys by turning on the gaslight and tossing things around the room. He searches in there, he searches outside, but the manager has already taken the boy to the police station so he can snag that reward money. Edna shows up at the cop shop and sees this sad little urchin sitting on a bench. She smiles large, but he doesn't. After all, who is this woman to him? But she's happy, and she squirts out a tear or two and hugs him. And I guess this is as good a place as any for my movie in a nutshell. So the kid, in a nutshell. Woman throws son away, then gets rich, so she gets him back. Because if she kept living as a poor woman, no one would let her get within 39.5 feet of this kid. When Charlie gets back home, he finds the door locked, so he just plunks down on the step and curls up to get some sleep. I don't recall if it was evident before, but you definitely see that the address on the door is 69. Risque gag by Chaplin, maybe? Chaplin had dream sequences and fantasies a lot in his movies, and he has one here. There are flowers all over the place in that courtyard, and John's even back, wearing angel's wings, in fact. I guess I'm hungry. My stomach's growling. I need some of that stew or some of those pancakes. Charlaroo gets his own set of angel wings, and they fly off together. The sequence had some decent cable stunts for the 1920s, and it was done well enough to even avoid showing the wires holding them up. Must have done a lot of takes. Still, in his dream, the big brother he brawled with earlier ends up fighting with him again because he has a lady love, and she's sweet on Charlie. Even in a fantasy, it all comes down to violence. The cop tries to take the double seat of the hoosegow, but his ability to fly in his dream comes in handy. He gets away until the cop pulls the gun and shoots him down. Wow, that was a little much. And I thought those two guys punching was violent. But Charlie's woken up from his nightmare by the policeman and is thrown in the back of a cop car. But actually, being grabbed by a coppola is good news this time, because they take him to Edna's great big house. The kid leaps into his adopted dad's arms, Mama smiles, and they all go inside. Movie over. Go home. I guess she'll either let Charlie live there with them, or she'll just let him enjoy the afternoon with the kid he raised. Then he's got to scram. I'm guessing she'll allow him to stay for good. It's a big house. You can find some space for the guy. He's little. Charlie Chaplin was wee. So the cast. Charles Chaplin was not only the headlining star, but he was the director, the writer, the producer, the editor, and the composer. For such a legend of the cinema, the chap didn't make that many movies. He only made 7 films over the span of about 30 years, in fact, between Modern Times in 36 and A Countess from Hong Kong in 67. And he only acted in 15 or 16 feature films in his entire career. But Bev and I have covered the reddest of the red letter titles. She always did these ones with me before. The Gold Rush, City Lights, Modern Times, The Great Dictator, and now we go back to the beginning of his feature film career with The Child. When you talk about the greatest filmmakers ever, especially when we're talking about a person talented enough to be able to do so many jobs, he's about as great as it gets. He pretty much always did those same 6 jobs in every film, too. Acting, writing, directing, producing, composing, and editing. Buster Keaton did something like 4 or 5 jobs in his own flicks, too. I don't think he did the composing of music very often, if ever. And of course, the Coens have almost always done 4 of those tasks throughout their careers. They just don't act or write the music. But people like this are rare, which makes Chaplin one of the most extraordinary artists of all time, in any medium. I used to say that I preferred Chaplin to Keaton, although we are talking about 2 geniuses. It's not like Buster Keaton isn't great, too. It was just the Ruth versus Mays debate. You're choosing Hall of Fame talent either way, 2 of the greatest ever. It's just which one you prefer. And as I said last week, they're both on AFI's Top 100 Stars list. Well, top 25 actors, male actors. Didn't write down the numbers. Then Chaplin's 10th and Keaton's in the 15, 20 range, somewhere in there. Maybe 1 spot behind the Marx Brothers for some reason. But I think my world outlook becoming so bleak in recent years has me more in line now with the stone-face guy, who keeps on trucking even when the world is always running him over. The Tramp did that too, but he was more emotional about it. And Chaplin got flat out maudlin sometimes. Keaton never did. But hey, I still love the smile though your heart is breaking, smile even though it's aching, a little fella too. Although now that they've both been featured on Have You Ever Seen 5 times, well, one of those for Keaton was a cameo in Sunset Boulevard as himself, but still 5 movies, I might never cover another film by either of them. So I'll say here what you've heard if you've listened to those reviews of the Keaton movies the past few years, and probably when Bev and I talked about the other ones in the past. I just wish their comedies made me laugh more. The Kid, for example, is more touching than it is funny. It's not like there aren't jokes and gags in this, because there are plenty. My sides, though, were in no danger of splitting. Maybe they would have been if I lived back in 1921. But I think Charlie knew all along what this should be. Not a gutbuster, but a love story between a simple man and the kid he found in the street. And a sad mother. And I just had a thought. She's an actress, right? Maybe she was always accessing heartbreaking emotions because she was heartbroken for 5 years. Now that that's fixed, will she not be a good actress anymore? Of course, there are stories about the real-life Chaplin liking his ladies young. His first, second, and fourth wives were, I don't know their exact ages, but they were way too young when he married them. So yeah, they were obviously not old enough to be doing it when he first got to bumping with them too. If that happened now, he'd be roasted for it. and maybe even have to deal with the Justice Department over it. But stars have always gotten away with more, and, well, all of it happened between 80 and 100 years ago. And the guy's been dead for about 47 years. We can't bring him back from the dead just to yell at him in social media, but go ahead and try. Okay, so how about Jackie Coogan, who wasn't even 5 years old when they started filming. I think he turned something like 12 when they were done filming. They shot for so long. Well, if you've heard of Peck's Bad Boy, he was it. That came out the same year this did. He continued making silent films the rest of the 20s and even went on to play Oliver Twist and Tom Sawyer. Tom Sawyer. Oh, and remember Uncle Fester in the Addams Family, the TV show in the 60s? That's him. The Cougs kept working in TV and major motion pictures into the early 80s, but this is obviously his signature work. To many, in fact, it's the greatest child performance in history. It's not my choice, but it is lovely. And part of what helped make him so good is that Chaplin made a real effort to treat him like his own son, which strengthened their bond even more. Although Coogan's own parents weren't so great, they had control of his money when he was a minor, and they blew a lot of it. How do you do that to your own kid? And I guess authorities made up a law to keep parents from doing that same thing to other child performers. It's called the California Child Actors Bill, or the Coogan Bill, and it insists that at least a certain percentage of earnings be kept in a trust until the actor turns 18. You know you're doing wrong when what you've done inspires the government to come up with a law to stop others from doing it too. And further irony is that Jackie's father is an actor in this. He's the pickpocket in the Flophouse who's picking the tramp's pocket, and he plays a few other characters too. Most of Edna Purviance's credits came in the days when people mostly made short films. She had worked with Chaplin a lot before this and made at least one more movie in the next couple years after it. But the end of her career saw her in 2 uncredited roles in Monsieur Verdoux and Limelight. She retired from acting sometime later in the 20s, but Chaplin kept her on the payroll. They had a romantic relationship outside of filmmaking, so I guess he felt like he owed her. They never got married, and I guess people whispered about how he was more helpful to her than he was to his own wives once the marriages ended. Carl Miller went on to be in Chaplin's A Woman of Paris a few years later. Edna's in that too, actually, so she did make at least one more movie with him before she retired, and then came back for those 2 in the 50s. Miller has a lot of silent film credits on his resume too, especially short films, but he's barely in this, so that's enough about him. The last actor I'll mention here leads me to an unexpected link. The co-director of last week's movie, Steamboat Bill Jr., was Charles Reisner, or Reisner? I guess it's Reisner. He and Keaton co-directed that. He plays the bully in this. I had no idea I was going to cover this guy for 2 straight weeks. It's a Charles Fest here in January 2025. And speaking of Charles, the director was Chaplin, of course, who was making his feature film debut here. He shot this film for over a year, which was long even for him. Well, when he was making short films, I don't think he took anywhere near that long to make them. But just when we're talking about the long shoot on, say, City Lights, for example, they did a ton of takes on some of the scenes in that, so that had to have been a long shoot. But he was known to be the Kubrick of his day, taking a lot longer than almost anybody else would to get the take the way he wanted it. Oh, and I talked on Steamboat Bill Jr. last week about how the print on Canopy, which looked fantastic because it was remastered in 4K, did have a modern music score, which isn't what you want, not what I want. So I regretted watching the flick in that form because I found a pretty good print elsewhere that had the proper old-timey music. Well, although I saw this on YouTube, and there are multiple versions of the film there, so be careful, I double-checked with the version of The Kid that I'd already recorded off TCM, and the music sounded the same. It just had a sepia tone on the YouTube print, while TCM ran a true black and white version. Very crisp, looked great. Sepia was good, black and white was even better. Although, as for the music in this movie, I just discovered that the score wasn't written by Chaplin until a 70s re-release. I guess the prints people saw before that were truly silent. The other technical guy to highlight is Roland Totherow, I guess is how you say that name, who shot the pretty pictures. He was the cinematographer for most of Chaplin's big titles. So if you like the look of the Gold Rush and City Lights, get in the DeLorean, go back in time, and thank Raleigh. Or Rowley. Maybe it's Rowley. All right, let's come to a conclusion about The Kid. I enjoyed it quite a bit, in fact. Easy thumbs up. Chaplin and Coogan are a terrific team. It's not like the rest of the cast doesn't do good things, but they just pale so much in comparison to the 2 main characters. But I didn't laugh. Luckily, I did get wrapped up in what's going on with the tramp and his little criminal buddy. I was emotionally invested in their chicanery, even if I was hoping I'd be guffawing more. Guffaw, not a common word in the lexicon, is it? So that was how I saw The Kid. Before I wrap her up today, I'll give you 3 trivia questions. These are theme-ish because we're talking comedy in a couple of them. Well, this wasn't that funny, but these movies are. So question number 1. Which of these actors has never played a weather person in a movie? And I'll give you 4 options. Steve Martin, Nicole Kidman, Eddie Murphy, or Nicolas Cage. Question number 2. After Anchorman came out and was so popular, Ben & Jerry made a Ron Burgundy-themed ice cream. What's that brand called? And question number 3. The song Some Enchanted Evening originated in which musical? Okay, so what are we doing on this channel in the next week or two? Well, we're off all next week because we'll be on our first beach vacation in 5 years. We don't short you guys on podcasts very often. We don't take very many breaks, but we also don't get away very often anymore. So we're going to be off for 10 days. And when we return on January 27th, we'll be yammering about Bev's last pick in the 2025 month of Bev, and it will be Kick-Ass. Get ready for some swearing in that one. The next time I post a show on my own will be on February 7th. The plan is to cover Peter Weir's Witness. That could change since I'm recording this in late December. It's a couple days after Christmas, and I might feel like doing something else in that slot instead and all that time frame in between. But if it is Witness, I'm going to tell you one little factoid here. The only time Harrison Ford has ever been nominated for an Oscar was Witness. It's hard to believe that two of the biggest stars ever are Cary Grant and Harry Ford, and they only ever had 3 Oscar nominations between them. Ford could get more, I guess, but he never has all these years since he made Witness. Okay, so contact us. Our email address is haveyoueverseenpodcast@gmail.com. You can find me as @MovieFiend on Twix and Ryan-Ellis on Blue Sky. Bev is @BevEllisEllis on Twix and Threads, while she's Bev Ellis Ellis on Blue Sky. Also rate and review our podcast on your app. Subscribe, for heaven's sake, and look for us on YouTube. You can find us by typing @HYES Ellis when you're on the tube. Then bookmark us, and you don't even have to miss another show, especially if you subscribe. And help yourself and our sponsor by buying some beans from Sparkplug Coffee. You can snag a beautiful 20% discount by using our HYES promo code. Go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES. As for the answers to those trivia questions, here's number 1. Which of these actors has never played a weather person in a movie? Steve Martin, Nicole Kidman, Eddie Murphy, or Nicolas Cage? It's Eddie Murphy. Cage, in fact, played a weatherman in a movie called The Weatherman. Kidman had that job in To Die For, and Steve Martin was a meteorologist in LA Story. Question number 2. After Anchorman came out and was so popular, Ben & Jerry made a Ron Burgundy-themed ice cream. What's it called? Scotchy Scotch Scotch. They quote something he says in the movie. And question number 3. The song Some Enchanted Evening originated in which musical? It was in South Pacific. And I mentioned Harrison Ford. Well, he sings that song in his car to Cindy Williams in American Graffiti. So that's the end of my review of The Kid. Thanks for listening. Join us for our chat about Matt Vaughn's Kick-Ass in a week and a half. Meantime, I'm going to avoid alleys. I don't need to stumble across abandoned babies. I'm 50. To paraphrase Murtaugh in Lethal Weapon, I'm too old for that spit. And cut.